Hi, everyone. Welcome to another very special episode of Aly's Take. I am so excited to have with me today Coach Michelle, the one and only Coach Michelle. um, it's so thankful for you to be here. It just means the world to me, and I know it'll mean a lot to our community. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome. That's so nice. And thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. So, community, Happy New Year, first of all.
Yes.
And we're going to go ahead and get started today on our topic. And today we are going to talk about something that we feel like maybe isn't addressed enough, maybe not talked about enough within the community. It's so important. And this episode was actually inspired by an email that I got from Michelle. I'm on her email list, as you all should be. And you can plug that at the end, Michelle, because it's really important. But it was about this exact topic. And I emailed her back and said, Michelle, we need to talk about this more in the community. Would you be willing to be a guest? And she so graciously agreed. So that is how we're here. And that is how we landed on this really important topic. So we're going to start discussing moving through overwhelm. And our very first part of this discussion today that we're going to talk about moving through overwhelm is, what is overwhelm? So Michelle, if you want to start us out and just kind of define this experience, and then I'll, chime in with my understanding, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So overwhelm is something that we all experience when we're going through something difficult, like insomnia and insomnia recovery. And when I think about overwhelm, I just think about those moments where we feel like it's too much. We can't be with it anymore. We can't handle it. And there's so many different ways to describe overwhelm. I mean, my clients have so many different ways of describing it. I had my own way of describing it. So we're all a little bit different, but some phrases that come to mind are things like, I just feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I can't breathe, things like that. And it's really just these moments where we feel like we cannot handle what's happening, essentially. We can't handle it. And the story is, this is too much. So that's how I think of overwhelm. And I think beyond that, mentally, physically, emotionally, overwhelm can feel a little bit different for everybody. So I always talk about even getting to know what overwhelm feels like for you.
Such a good point.
Part of this, because we may not know as we're starting. And I know for me, overwhelm just felt like I was drowning or choking, and it felt like there was a weight on my chest. And again, this feeling of too much. I can't be with this. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the story, right? That it tells is I can't. So from my perspective and my understanding of overwhelm, which of course I experienced plenty of during insomnia recovery,
plenty of them.
Right? Everybody does. Like, we all experience this, and it's really incapacitating. And I think that's a super good word to explain it, because really how I understand overwhelm is our nervous system gets overwhelmed by an experience that is too much for us to process. It goes beyond our capacity to integrate it. And when we experience overwhelm, it's actually stored as trauma in our bodies. And so that is why this somatic approach that we take to insomnia recovery is so important and so integral to recovery, right? So the other way I understand it is that when we are in this state of overwhelm, the nervous system can move into freeze mode. And this is that protective state of our autonomic nervous system that overactivates certain parts of the brain, and it underactivates other regions of the brain. It particularly deactivates the prefrontal cortex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where all new learning occurs. This is where logic and reason live. And when we are in a state of overwhelm, this part of our brain, it essentially goes offline. We are only in survival mode now, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And I often explain it to clients as, we're seeing red. That's, we're just seeing red. And it's like, I just have to survive, right? And so everything feels oversensitized and overwhelming, right?
I think seeing red is a good way to describe it as well. Seeing red.
Yeah. Because it's like that state where we're just like, I'm just holding on for dear life here, right? It's like, it's a really scary place to be. And what Michelle and I want you to know today is that we understand, that we have been there, and it does end, right? You're not going to be in this state forever. So with that being said, do you have anything more that you might want to say about what it is, what this experience is? Or do you feel good?
Well, it's fundamentally normal to have as well. And I think that sometimes when you're going through this, so much of the work that we talk about, and this is one reason I like talking about this, is we can really emphasize words like acceptance, surrender, befriending, right? They all mean fundamentally the same thing. And it has to do with really going towards our fear or staying with this hard experience and really
Right.
starting to be with it and move through it and respond in new helpful ways so that we can start to teach our brain and body, "Hey, we're safe. There's nothing to
Yes.
be afraid of." Except when we're in overwhelm, actually a sign of overwhelm is that doing that and continually trying to lean in, so to speak, will feel so much worse and unmanageable, and sort of this feeling of I can't be with this at all right now. So I think that's
Right.
fine, is if you're trying to, because you've heard, well, I need to befriend this, for example,
Yeah.
but it just feels absolutely impossible to actually do in practice. That can be a sign that you're really overwhelmed. So for
Yes.
those of you listening, if you're not sure what overwhelm feels like in your body, in your experience, that's sort of a hint that you could be
Absolutely.
overwhelmed, is moving towards or staying with the experience just feels impossible or unmanageable. And anything like that is just a sign that actually, oh, wait a minute, I'm here and I need to take a bit of a different approach for a bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, so true. For me, that felt like, um, I have to, but I can't. Like,
Yeah,
right? It's like
yeah,
I I just didn't have the capacity, which we're going to talk about more. But it's a real experience, and actually like trying to force it because that prefrontal cortex has gone offline and we're in this complete survival mode. Trying to force ourselves to acceptance at that point is so unhelpful and counterproductive. Can even be re-traumatizing, right? It's like it can create more of this experience that we're trying to avoid, we're trying to recover from,
that's it.
right?
That's
Yeah.
exactly it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's like, this is not the time to practice acceptance. This is the time to accept that we can accept right now that we are in this state of overwhelm, and that is okay. It's not going to be our forever, and we have to honor where we're at kind of every step of the way on this journey. And that's why what you said, when we first started talking about this, is so important. Understanding what that looks like for you. I mean, as coaches, we can hear it, right? When somebody talks to us, like, I feel like I'm drowning. The client that told you, I feel like I'm breathing through a straw, right? And it's this overwhelming feeling of, and you said it, I can't do this. Like, this is impossible, right? And I really do feel and see that most of us start out there. Most of us start out
Yeah,
where the idea of accepting and allowing, letting go, of all this is actually really unimaginable, right? We all start from that place, and that's just perfectly normal. So,
yes.
like, I just want to say, don't worry about that. You're normal. That's where we all start. That's where we all start. And it takes some time. It really takes some time, right? To build the capacity.
It does. That's just
Yeah.
it. And then even when we do, we still go back and forth. I think
We go
that's
back and forth.
one thing
We
I
go,
like to talk about as well, is just and I think you've referred to it as a dance, which
yes. And
is,
we're going to discuss that. Yeah. We're going to go right into that. In fact, we'll move right on since we're kind of,
oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. That's my bad.
oh, no, that's perfect. So our next little topic here is what to do. How do we move through overwhelm? So now we've identified, what that is, what that looks like for us. And now let's talk a little bit about, what do we do when we're in this state? Do you want to start us off here, Michelle?
Sure. So I'll start by talking about when we're not in overwhelm and we feel like we have capacity. So I think of it
Yes.
as capacity versus overwhelm. And I know we're going to dive into more of that in a little bit. But for me, capacity just means that you feel like you you are capable of being with what's happening, even though it's really hard potentially. And maybe you're only able to be with it for small amounts of time, but there's still capacity to be with it versus that overwhelm that we just talked about, which is, I just can't.
Yeah.
Too much. And so there are just moments where, as we're coming into as we're starting insomnia recovery, we might be in overwhelm a lot. We might be coming to this process in deep overwhelm, and that's really normal. And then we might find ourselves building a bit of capacity, because that's what we do. We build capacity within ourselves.
Yes.
We're going through this. And so our capacity will change. It will grow. And as that's happening, we can still go back and forth. I think that's the key thing to know, to normalize that we can come into a place of being able to really move through the experience differently. And we can feel like we're there. We're like, I got it, right? I got this whole acceptance, surrender thing under my belt. And then we find ourselves in overwhelm again.
That's right.
Thinking
when a speed bump hits, usually, right?
Right. Something happens and that's it. And then we feel like we failed. And then we feel like, well, I know what I'm supposed to be doing all this acceptance work. So we might double down and keep trying, but then it feels like it's backfiring. It feels like quicksand in that moment because we're just too overwhelmed to do it. And we are. And so knowing that means that in these moments when we do notice that we're overwhelmed, is we actually just, I call it hitting the pause button. We notice, like, okay, I'm here. That's okay. I'm going to hit the pause button. I'm not going to continue to face my fears. I'm not going to continue to stay with the experience and to practice being with it in any sort of different way. None of that will be happening. Instead, I'm going to shift into what I've been calling self-care mode. What I love, I heard you call it extreme self-care, which is because, and I always say, I wish there was a bit of a different word I could use for this, because people hear self-care and they either cringe or they think of it as like the bubble bath moment or something.
Right.
You're lighting a candle for yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's much more purposeful than that, and much deeper than that. And it really is about going into how can I support myself right now? How can I make myself more comfortable? And how can I also just maybe distract myself as well? And I think distraction can get a bit of a bad reputation, but distraction can be incredibly, incredibly helpful, especially when we're overwhelmed, to go in.
Especially.
A lot of intentional distraction can be wonderful when we're overwhelmed. And I know I've had many clients who have sort of almost guilted themselves about using distraction, because they were thinking, well, I'm not really accepting.
Right. I'm supposed to sit with this. Aren't I supposed to sit with this and face my fears? And it's like, not when you're in overwhelm.
Absolutely not. You were doing the right thing, but then beating yourself up for it, which can happen sometimes, right?
Yes.
So what's so tricky is I never like to be really prescriptive about what self-care
to do
means, right? Because people always say, like, tell me exactly what to do. And I'm like, well, that would be a disservice, because we are all different. And so we need to self-experiment just a little bit and find the things that genuinely help us feel more supported, more comfortable, or more distracted in a way that's going to feel helpful to us when we're in these places. And for one person, that could be watching a movie they love. But for another person, that might not feel very good in that moment. And so I also, in addition to self-experimentation with this, like to recommend have 2 or 3 things. Don't just have one thing. Have a few options for yourself. So for example, you might choose music as an option, but then there might be a time when you're overwhelmed, where you feel like you can't really take that in or listen to music, just as an example, and you might do something else. So having a few different options of things that feel good for you can be helpful. And I like to take enjoyment off the table.
Yes, you don't have to enjoy it.
Enjoyment can feel like a lot of pressure. You don't have to be having fun. This is much more about supporting yourself.
Yes.
And so that's often kind of what it will look like for one person won't be the same for the next. So for example, what did it look like for you, if you can pull up some of your overwhelm
Yeah, yeah. So, and I love the way you describe this, because I totally agree with you, and that's the way I say it too, is drop into extreme self-care.
Mhm.
And Michelle, you actually really helped me with this so much when I was going through my own insomnia recovery. And, just for the community to let you know, like, Michelle was one of my coaches and she was instrumental in my recovery. So, I just obviously adore you and think the world of you, and thank you so much. But yeah, you really, really helped me with this, because I remember, chatting with you when I was in this state, and you said, similar to what we're talking about here, Aly, why? Because I had stopped taking all medication, right? I'm like, I'm just going cold turkey. Which we do not recommend that to, anyone. Like you can take it slow, right? It's just, there's
You're allowed
no
to go in easy.
rush.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just so hard on myself. And so that came from a place of being hard on myself. And I really spiraled, and I fell back into a space of overwhelm. And, I talked to you about it, and you said, what are you doing, Aly? Why? No, this isn't the time to do that. Like, this is the time to support yourself and, have this extreme self-kindness and self-compassion. And that can absolutely mean taking a med. Like, don't do that right now. This is not the time for that. And it was really real, really helpful, because, in some way I needed permission,
Mhm.
because I wasn't in a state that I could trust my own thoughts. That's another thing that we might mention here. When
Yeah,
you are in overwhelm, those thoughts are going to be so distorted, and we cannot trust our thoughts when we are in this space, right? They are not real. I mean, they're real, but they're not true.
yeah.
They're, the thoughts are
Even
real. They
less
are
than normal,
happening.
even less than normal, right?
That's right, right. And we cannot trust our thoughts at this juncture, just not at all. That's true when we're in anxiety, and anything that is like this. And so that was really, really helpful. And so what I would say is, when we are in a state of overwhelm and we are just seeing red, and it's just like, I'm barely surviving right now, right? This is that time where we don't try to accept, we don't try to force, we don't try to, like, be with the discomfort, whatever. We drop into this extreme self-care where we try to find as much comfort within that discomfort as possible. And if that means taking a med, that's just absolutely fine. If that means taking a walk, outside in nature, that was one of the things that I did that really helped to ground me.
Mhm.
And I read in your email, like that co-regulation with your husband, that too was very helpful for me. It's like, just hold me for a minute.
Yes.
And that's really co-regulations. Nervous systems can do that for one another, right? So that was really helpful. So those were my go-tos, and talking to a supportive friend, right? And yeah, my husband, and all of these things were kind of how I would drop into that self-care, and it was really, really helpful. And as I let that experience happen and wasn't fighting it so much, right? I was supporting myself the best way I knew how, and allowing it to move through. And that's kind of key here, right? Is like, nothing is forever, but the more we stand in, absolutely not, absolutely not, it's going to intensify. So the more we can drop into this self-care, self-kindness, self-compassion, like, I can give this comfort to myself any way that I see fit, right? I know me best. How can I best support myself here? And once we can do that, and like you said, start to notice this quality of within ourselves when we're inching towards overwhelm, we can almost preemptively support
Yes.
ourselves going forward, right? As we learn how this looks for us.
Yes. You start to notice the little warning signals along the path to overwhelm over time,
That's right.
right? At
That's right.
first, we may not even know when we're in overwhelm. And then after a while, we're like, oh, this is what this looks like. And then
That's
we
right.
see the breadcrumbs leading up to it, where we can actually just take the exit ramp before we
Yes. Before it goes
flow.
full blown.
Yeah, into the full blown. That can take a little while, but
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
certainly comes, and then we can actually start to, again, take the exit ramp a little bit more frequently. And
Yes.
I love how
Yes.
you mentioned, Aly, taking medication is part of overwhelm, because I always include that when I talk to my clients, because they'll always, does that include medication? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Assuming it's been prescribed to you. I think we all assume that, but
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's when I say pick 2 or 3 things, that's inclusive of medication. And, as opposed to beating yourself up for needing some extra support, which we all do way too much of.
We
Embrace,
do.
see it as part of what is supporting you right now. And that's so incredibly helpful. And so
Yeah.
there's really nothing that's off limits, nothing that's right or wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think one other piece is that I've only started talking about more recently with this as well is sometimes people can assume that, let's say they're doing that, for example, they've noticed they're in overwhelm, they've hit the pause button, they've embraced some support, whatever that looks like for them. But overwhelm's not going anywhere. It's not budging. There can be this perception of, I'm doing something wrong
Yeah. Yeah.
because I am going into some deep self-care right now. Maybe I did take some extra medication that feels right for me, whatever it might be. I'm doing this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still really overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's normal too. So
It is.
expectation that our overwhelm is going to shift immediately because we're going into this self-care place doesn't always happen. It can happen, it can lift, but other times it may not. And our body might need some time to go through, its own physiological cycles, whatever it needs to do behind the scenes
Yes.
before things start to settle a little bit.
That's right.
That
It's not an immediate.
no,
No, it is definitely not an immediate response of our nervous system.
not.
It does take time.
So that's important, because if we think this should be responding at a certain, either really quickly or at a certain set timeline, we can start to think we're doing something wrong. We're not.
Right.
And
Right.
what's so tricky is whenever we do come out of overwhelm, which we will, we won't ever be able to compare it to, well, how long would I have been here, or how
Mm-hmm.
intense would it have gotten if I hadn't done this self-care approach,
Right.
if that
Right.
makes sense, right? So we actually are having a shorter overwhelm. We are having a less intense, but we can't compare it
We
to
can't compare it.
on the other route of continuing to try to move towards and to be with, and all of that. So,
Right.
so just allowing the body to do what it needs to do, allowing some time. That's
Yes.
really important, because I know so many of you out there, you might be just actually doing this and then frustrated because you're not seeing things dissipate in the moment or quickly. And that needs to be
Yeah.
normalized so that you're not doing anything wrong.
That's right. That's right. And that is partly why, I kind of always talk about, or I like to say, yes, this is an incredibly uncomfortable experience, and there's no sugarcoating that. It is just incredibly uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. It is painful. It's really not, it's awful. Like,
Yep.
let's just say it, right? Okay. It is. And the point of what we're talking about here, and what we're trying to get across here, is we make ourselves as comfortable as we can within the discomfort. And that means the discomfort is still going to be there,
Yes.
right? It's not that that's going to immediately fade, not at all. But we can make it more tolerable for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? And we can do this in any number of ways, like we have already mentioned several of. And you get to decide what is best for you, because it's an individual thing, and everybody gets to decide how to support themselves best. When we can take that factor of the self berating and the self-judgment and the self-criticism, when we can take that out of the equation, things start to get a lot easier, right? But I'm the first to tell you that came a lot later in my journey, like that piece of not, being so hard on myself. So I get it. And, this is like why we're focusing on this right now, is to say, like, totally understood. And there is still going to be some discomfort. The good news is our nervous system is really a self-regulating system. And given enough time and space and support,
Mhm.
it will naturally and organically come back to a state of regulation. And so this is how we move through that overwhelm.
Yes, and this is how we actually signal safety when we're in these states.
Absolutely.
I think that's
Yes.
the big part is, yes, if we're feeling that we're in a place of capacity with what's happening, we can stay and practice. Let's say, for example, working with a really hard symptom, for example. And that will signal a lot of safety to our brain and body. But when we're in overwhelm, the thing that's going to signal the most safety is everything we're sharing today.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
just
so
about
good.
switching gears because I think I don't know about you, but I've had clients be worried that if I switch gears this way, then I'm sort of it's
They
not
feel like they're
part.
regressing.
Yeah, I'm taking a step back, or this isn't
Mhm.
part of my recovery. I'm somehow stalling over
Yeah.
here.
You're
And it's
like, no, no, no.
this is the moving forward. This is part of your
That's
recovery
right.
process. It's
And
in
I love how you said that in your email. You said, the work of overwhelm and moving through overwhelm is just as important as the work of acceptance. And it really is. And that leads us so beautifully into our next topic, which is the dance of insomnia recovery. And that is exactly what you were just saying is this, going between these two states. So if you want to just continue on that thread just a little bit more and explain that.
sure. Well, we had started by saying that
Sorry.
no, don't worry. That when we come into recovery, we are usually we're in that state of overwhelm. We start there and we may stay there for a certain amount of time. We start to build a little bit more capacity. But even when we feel like we've built quite a bit of capacity, we can still be going back and forth between, again, what I call this capacity and overwhelm, this dance back and forth.
So true.
And as we go along, it's true, we will probably be going into overwhelm a little bit less and a little bit less. But it doesn't mean we never go there.
That's right. It's just, it de-intensifies over time. As we start to build this capacity, and in nervous system speak, we call this the window of tolerance. And as that window of tolerance expands, we're able to handle more discomfort
Yeah,
with more ease. It's not to say that the discomfort is no longer there. It's just that it doesn't bother us so much. Yeah,
yes, exactly. We're bigger, so to speak.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. So allowing this dance, this back and forth between capacity and overwhelm is so important, and normalizing it and embracing it as part of the process as opposed to I'm doing well, I'm doing badly. I'm doing
That's right.
well, I'm doing badly, I'm failing, that kind of
Gosh,
inner
that
talk.
is such a good point, Michelle. Oh,
Right? It's
yes.
so common. It's like, no, this is okay. This is what this looks like because you're still doing really wonderful support and work while you're in overwhelm as well.
Yeah,
And
that is work too. Right? That is the internal, there's internal work through all of this, but it doesn't stop right when we're in overwhelm. That is
and
part of the journey.
that's what helps you come back into more capacity too.
That's right.
That's what allows that shift to happen.
It's what builds that window of tolerance. It's what increases it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I love it. I love this so much. Yeah. And I talk about it with two clients in a really similar way where we move through this dance, right? And we move between control,
Mhm.
fighting, and
Yes.
resisting with all of our might,
Yes.
right? And then we realize at some point, gosh, this is absolutely futile.
Yeah.
And something shifts within us, and we get a little bit closer to acceptance, surrender, and letting go. And then we go back, right? And it's this dance. It really is this dance. And it's back and forth. It's back and forth. And it is for a while because this is actually how we build a new neural pathway.
Yeah.
And there's no other way to do it. The only way out is through, how we always say. And this is how this happens, is this dance between the two until finally we land at it's all allowed.
Hmm.
It's
Even
all
overwhelmed.
okay.
Even
Even
overwhelmed.
overwhelm. Right. Even overwhelm. It's all allowed, and I have the capacity to, be okay within it all.
Yes.
And that takes some time, but because this is the whole dance of recovery, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. It makes me think of I'm going to get this quote wrong, but just the idea that calm waters isn't what creates the strong sailor, right? It's the rough waters.
That's right.
That's sort of the same idea. Makes me think of that with with recovery being the same thing. It's the only way out is through, but as you're doing it, you're becoming stronger, you're growing capacity. So your experience of capacity will change, your experience of overwhelm will change, all of it will change over
Yep.
time, essentially.
Yep. And whether you're aware of it or not, like this is happening, kind of beneath the surface, and yes,
Yes.
behind the scenes. Yes, I love that. Okay, so our last little thought today is just that this really will pass and you will be okay. And in the midst of it, in the throes of it, it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. And that kind of sentiment, it's biologically true, because when we are in this state of overwhelm and the fight or flight mechanism is taken over, or the freeze mechanism, or the shutdown collapse, right? Protective states, it has physiological impacts on our body, and our vision literally narrows, right? Our pupils can constrict and our heart starts racing. And all of these are like biological signs that we're in one of these protective states, and it's all completely normal, and it definitely passes, right?
Yes.
So I just want people to understand that what you're experiencing right now, as hard as it is, it really will pass, and it is completely normal experience. It's actually what Daniel always says. We'll quote Daniel here, but it's that feature, not a bug, right, in your brain. It's actually a sign that your brain is working exactly as it was designed to do, to protect you, right? It's just misidentified this threat as real, and it's just a perceived one, and we have to train it and teach it that we're safe and okay. And that just takes time, right?
Oh, exactly. It takes time, and going into this extreme or deep self-care is exactly how we teach our brain and body that we're safe also during overwhelm too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Michelle, this has just been so powerful and such a good conversation. I can't thank you enough for being here. Do you have anything else that you want to leave the community with on this topic before we kind of plug your website and your
Oh,
yeah.
oh, well, I really think we covered, I can't think of anything else. And we did such a great job of covering off this topic fairly well. But I think I love this fourth point: this will pass and you will be okay. I think that's the best thing to leave off on. That's the most important message: is this will pass.
Absolutely. Oh, and there's my dog. I know. Good timing. All right. Well, you can find Michelle if you search the internet at thehopefulmind.com.
Yeah, hopefulmind.com. You can find me there. Yep.
You can sign up for her newsletter there, and please do, because it's full of gems and insights that will be so helpful during your recovery journey. And I mean, I could just gush more and more about how grateful I am for you, and so happy to be within this sphere that you are in, in this sleep coaching world. So thank you for taking the time to do this with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was so great, and so great to reconnect with you today.
You too. Okay, community, we're going to leave you for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate your time. And if you need further support, please also check out the sleepcoachschool.com. You can find us there. You can find me there. Michelle's out on her own now. But we have amazing programs and also wonderful one-on-one support if that's what you need. So please find us. Thanks so much, community.
Hi, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I hope you are feeling excited right now because you're so close to the finish line of Insomnia. And if you found that aha moment you've been looking for in this video, please share it with the world. Because insomnia can be such a lonely and isolating place before you find our community. Speaking of which, if you would like some more personalized support on your journey, then head over to thesleepcoachschool.com. We have free and paid courses available with certified sleep coaches who have seen the worst of insomnia, left the struggle, and now are ready to help you. If you decide to join, we look forward to seeing you on the other side.